Today, I'm here with Rena Greifinger. She's the Managing Director of Maverick Collecti and Director for Philanthropy and Population Service International. We are here today to talk about philanthropy, but from a feminist perspective, right, Rena?
Yes, my favorite topic.
So welcome on board on When Power Podcast, and thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Great. So I take you straight into the conversation with a question that I like to ask all my guests. What is that you're fighting for today, Rena?
I'm fighting for women's voice, choice, and agency. So this is actually a term that we coined here at Population Services International, where I've worked for 11 years, an organization that is committed to women's reproductive health and rights across the world, as well as access to healthcare across the whole spectrum of global health. But what it really boils down to is really all people, particularly women, having a voice in the way their healthcare is designed and delivered and the policies that affect it, having a choice over if and when to have kids, fertility, pregnancy, abortion, motherhood, as well as other choices that involve the health of themselves and their families, and having the agency to actually act on those choices. So that's been kind of my call to action for my entire career. What's interesting is that I also sit in an interesting position of working with high net wealth women philanthropists who also care about women's voice, choice, and agency. And in my time working with wealthy women, I've come to realize that there's a lot of need for us to also focus on their voice, choice, and agency over their wealth identity, and their money. And so I like to say that I sit at this nexus of kind of supporting and equipping and even empowering women to have more control over their bodily autonomy, their livelihoods, and their capital.
Very interesting fight, I have to say. Not an easy one, perhaps, but I like to think that the two things are also very nicely connected, although maybe for people that are listening to us, they can sound like two very different topics and environment to operate in. But as we will discover through this conversation, we can see how they are all interconnected and how your experience as well brought you where you are today. When Power is all about stories, I'm curious to know a little bit about you. What motivates you? What inspires you? Why you wake up every day?
Well, I was born into a family of kind of social justice warriors. I've talked about this a lot, but my grandfather was a major leader in the labor rights union and labor rights movement in the U.S. Both of my parents worked in public health and had thriving careers in public health. My mom ran a very large program for New York's poor to make sure they had access to healthcare, and my father was an activist and physician in prisons and jails across the U.S. fighting for inmates' rights to healthcare. And so I really grew up in a household and in a family that prioritized justice and equity, and especially fighting for causes and people and issues that are typically underfunded, under-resourced, and often stigmatized in society. And so I like to say that social justice kind of runs through my blood and was very important to me and my family, that I enter a career where I was able to use my own education, privilege, power to remove or help try to remove the barriers to others being able to access and leverage their own power. I get to work with some of the most incredible, innovative, smart, passionate people every day in this kind of large ecosystem of nonprofit leaders, activists, social workers, teachers, frontline change makers, philanthropists who care deeply about, dismantling harmful systems. And so I think that's really what keeps me motivated. The work is grueling, and you can get really pessimistic and really low, especially given even where we are today in the world. It's like, pick your crisis. There's just so many everywhere all the time. And for me, when I do get down and low, usually first I find a snack, and then I really kind of take a moment to reflect on this incredible ecosystem of people that are, you know, resilient and persistent and continue the fight every day for a more just and equitable world. And I actually feel just so privileged and grateful to be part of it.
It's great the work you're doing. We will discover more. I can't wait to dig a little deeper in this interview. I would like to ask you, what is the Maverick Collective? And what is the work you're doing? Because as we started this conversation, said that we're going to delve into a topic that is perhaps very overlooked or not even taking consideration from a gender perspective, which is philanthropy. And we are trying to understand if it can be feminist. So I think the story of Maverick Collective is going already to take us in the right direction.
So I'll tell you a bit about Maverick Collective. Maverick Collective was founded 10 years ago by Melinda French Gates and the Crown Princess of Norway with global health organization PSI. And the idea was to build a community of high net wealth women who wanted to go, as we say, beyond the checkbook and engage deeply in the work that they were funding as philanthropists so that they could become stronger champions for the work. Melinda herself 10 years ago was really coming out onto the world stage as not just someone with a lot of money and married into power, but actually someone who could be taken seriously as an activist and a champion for women's rights, for gender equity, for reproductive health and rights. And she wanted to see more women really be able to step into that power with confidence, as well as with competence on the issues. You know, typically, I don't like to draw too many distinctions, women this, men that. But what I have learned in working with women donors over the last 10 years is that they really want to know their stuff. They won't feel comfortable out there advocating for an issue until they feel really strong and competent that they know the issue, that they've been out to the field, they've been in the work with those on the front lines. And that way they can speak with true credibility and authenticity about why this matter is so important. And so what we do at Maverick Collective is we bring women, high net wealth, women with resources into our community. They make a significant investment in a project that is advancing women's health, reproductive rights, gender equity around the world. And then we get them deeply engaged, hands-on in that work. We get them out to the field. We get them on calls with the project team. The idea is not to treat them as a donor where we're just spoon feeding them glossy results and kind of, you know, speaking to some sort of proposal that we wrote a year ago. We're actually letting them in, as I say, under the hood and really helping them understand the realities and the complexities of the issues that we work on, the problems we're trying to solve, and typically in very hard places around the world. PSI works in 46 countries across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. We are working with some of the most marginalized communities and on some of the most stigmatized problems, right? We're talking about menstrual health, mental health, access to contraception, particularly for adolescents, you know, child marriage and childbearing among adolescent girls, access to abortion where it's legal, HIV and AIDS, right? Men who have sex with men, sex workers. So PSI has always been known to be on the cutting edge of innovation in healthcare, but also taking on healthcare issues among populations and in groups and in communities that are typically really underserved and being ignored or even stigmatized and marginalized from society. We're an organization that says we go where others won't. And in Maverick Collective, we say we go where other funders won't. So typically Mavericks are coming in with really flexible money to allow PSI to learn and grow in a space that is not being funded at scale. So their money is helping us test new approaches, new technologies, working on issues that are not getting enough attention, giving PSI the space and flexibility and time to be nimble and agile, to try, to fail, to iterate, and ideally to demonstrate impact and prove concept so that then together with our donor, we can go to, you know, donor governments, to ministries of health, to large foundations and say, here, we've demonstrated impact. We've de-risked the investment for you. Now you can crowd in and help us take this idea to scale. Over the last 10 years, through Maverick Investments, we've unlocked an additional $100 million in new funding for under-resourced programs reaching women and girls. We have changed policies in 5 countries, and we've reached 7 million people directly with life-saving access to healthcare. We've grown our community to be 55 women strong. They range in age from 23 to 83. We have a really strong group of young women who come into the collective under the age of 45. Over half our members are under 45 when they join and are typically making their first significant gift, whether that's at all, just entering philanthropy for the first time, or perhaps making their first gift to organizations and projects happening internationally. So it's a really exciting opportunity for us to create a thriving, intimate, multi-generational cohort of women that become truly like sisters in action, and to start them on a path to really understanding the catalytic role that private capital can have in moving the needle on big, complex, hairy social and health problems in the world.
It's truly amazing, and the impact as well that you have on women and girls worldwide, and on such important topics like you already mentioned, that regards women health in general, and they are always overlooked, and it's not something that maybe regular donors will invest on. So for me, this is really interesting. And I have a question for from a person that is not an expert in fundraising and is not an expert in the world of philanthropy. Also for our listeners, is what donors would normally invest on?
Yeah, a lot of the philanthropy that we see is like safe bets, right? Money going to really large elite universities that have massive endowments and aren't necessarily, that have a lot of funding already. Money going to the arts, which I'm not, none of this is bad, right? I'm not here to say that this philanthropy is bad and this philanthropy is good. What we typically see, though, is philanthropy is very risk averse. So donors are often giving money to things that feel like safe bets, where they can, see impact right away, where they can see, I'm going to build a school because I know exactly that children will enter that school. And that is great, right? Yes, we need more funding for schools. Yes, we need funding for homeless shelters, et cetera. But how do we actually get philanthropists to invest in the long-term systems change that would wipe out homelessness, or that would erase the inequities in schools, right? Even in my own line of work, it's a lot easier for a reproductive health philanthropist to fund giving out contraception to women to make sure that they can, prevent that pregnancy for the next year. And that is amazing, and we need that, and that should never stop. What we also need, though, is funding for the movement builders and the advocates and the activists who are working at like a systems level to ensure that we never again have policies that strip away women's rights to access that contraception in the first place. Mm-hmm. And what typically happens in philanthropy is that we are getting a lot of money at the kind of putting like what we call in the US a Band-Aid on something, right? Like just kind of fixing a problem we see right in front of us rather than getting to the roots. And so what we're also trying to do through Maverick Collective is to really steward this group of women and their capital toward projects and innovations that are helping to get at the roots of the problems that we see, and to actually reshape or strengthen systems so that you have sustainable impact over the long term. What that usually requires is a lot more trust and flexibility and patience, right? And when people giving their money to something, it's really hard to actually have trust and patience and flexibility when you are giving your hard-earned money over to somebody else to fix a problem that could take decades to see any impact.
And do you think these qualities, they are more feminine than masculine? Patience, trust? flexibility. From a very beginner in terms of knowledge in this field, and what you just shared as well is that sometimes maybe there is the urge from donors to, you say, no, put a band-aid. So trying to solve the problem as it is right now without maybe even thinking about the future or a long-lasting effect. Sometimes maybe as well for what is perceived through the media too, through news, it's like maybe some big donors are trying to kind of like clean their conscience too, and but then there is no an outlook on the future on what is going to be the bigger impact of that donation. So you say now there is more trust, more flexibility, more, I think also more empathy as well, which I believe they are qualities not I'm saying that men don't have, but perhaps women, they have more. So we are seeing a shift in this in philanthropy as well.
We're definitely seeing a shift, and I would absolutely call these tenets true tenets of feminist philanthropy and feminist giving. And there is a large and growing movement of those of us in the philanthropic space that are really leaning into this idea of a more feminist approach to philanthropy. And let's remember that that doesn't mean only women, right? That like what we need is, you know, an entire society of people across genders that adopt more feminist principles. And a lot of that is grounded in empathy, trust, understanding that long-term change requires patience, requires long-term giving, multi-year giving, you know, funding movements and movement leaders and activists and advocates who are doing that very hard, patient, but grueling work of trying to change norms, change policies, change mindsets, change behavior. And so funding with those principles in mind, and first and foremost, adopting a mindset of trust and understanding that it is almost always the people who are on the front lines, who are in this work every day, who come from the communities that are most impacted, who have lived experience. They typically also have the expertise on how to solve these problems, or at least on what steps to take, and are more connected in with what communities want and need than somebody who is sitting in a philanthropist chair. Again, that is not always the case, but it's mostly the case. And what we often see, right, is especially people who have made a lot of money in business, let's say, feel that they know how to solve a problem that is completely disconnected from their own life experience, their own community, even their own country. They can be highly successful in business. It doesn't mean that they know how to solve for child marriage in Ethiopia, right? And Melinda talks about that in her book. And so philanthropy is one of the only kind of sectors where we have people who are calling the shots and in charge, who often have absolutely no experience or education in how to do it, right? Donors hold a lot of power, and we have, you know, an entire culture that equates wealth with power, and that is extremely harmful, especially in the space of philanthropy. And and women can be just as guilty of this as men, right? So again, what we're talking about is how do we meet donors where they are and bring them on in a kind of an engaged learning journey that helps get them proximate to the issues and communities and impact, and then kind of helps them understand where their power and control sits and how to really dismantle the inequities and the power inequities in philanthropy through the way that they practice it themselves. At Maverick Collective, we've developed a framework that we call philanthropy's A game. You know, how do you bring your A game to philanthropy? And when we talk about an A game, we're talking about authenticity, accountability, and activation. We want to kind of launch a generation of philanthropists that are more authentic, more true to themselves and to the world, that can show up in a relationship with a grantee with as much authenticity of who they are, what they know, and especially what they don't know, as they expect back from a grantee. You know, too often we have nonprofits where you know, it's it's hard to tell our donors the truth. You know, things are going wrong, things got messed up, expectations got dashed, you know, a million externalities have affected our ability to deliver this program, right? Climate impacts, war, conflicts, you know, things happening in the government, someone, you know, we had to let somebody go. We've had fraud inside our organization. Do you know how hard it is to talk to donors and say, actually, we weren't able to deliver on the outcome that we wrote to you in our proposal because of XYZ? So how do we create more authentic relationships and conversations between donors and their grantees? And how do we foster a sense of accountability where donors are just as accountable to their grantees as they expect grantees to be back to them? You know, how do we foster a culture of donors feeling that they need to show up for their grantees, to trust their grantees, to provide that type of multi-year long-term funding and engagement so that grantees can actually get stuff done? And finally, how do we help donors become more activated in the movements that they're funding? You know, I often say that as a wealth holder, your financial capital is just one type of capital that you have, and it's not even always the biggest, right? You have your intellect is your capital, your social ties are your capital, and your curiosity is your capital. And bring all of it, right? Bring curiosity, bring vulnerability, bring your Rolodex, and help your grantee partners actually, achieve success through all of different ways that you can show up as a networker, an influencer, a champion, and sometimes also just a silent partner that gets out of the way so that teams can do what they need to do.
Thank you as well for the reminder that feminism, we need to break out of this idea that feminism is just connected with women. It is, but we want to do good for everyone, you know, and the impact that an action can have on a gender issue then has a domino effect on many other area of our life where, you know, men or other genders are operating. So it's not just about us. And it's I'm happy you just remind us this, as many people, and there is still just this conception thinking about, you know, feminists, they just care about women, they hate men, they don't, you know, they don't like men, they don't want to do this. But no, actually we want to change things for everyone so that we have and humanity, you know, people and human rights respected everywhere, starting from us. So again, it's great what you're doing, and it's great that you involve donors throughout the process. And it's not just, okay, I'm looking at you like you are a check. You represent money to me. Thank you for the money and goodbye. And this is how, without even involving them in the process. So I think here there is another layer added to the Maverick Collecti, which is very interesting. So it's not just, okay, we get your money, but also let me show you what we do, and also let me teach you, you know, what you can do and what you can learn from this experience, which I think is very is a very feminine trait, I have to say. Very interesting. I was reading an article, and I say that generational wealth also is changing. So there is a shift in that sense. So money are going towards girls and daughters and women, and there are a lot of women entrepreneurs coming up, and then obviously this will make a change. Perhaps we will not see this immediately, like we say, you know, change take time. But would you like to comment on this? And maybe, because you already mentioned the group of women you work through is quite diverse in terms of age, but I'm also curious to know if there is any changes as well on an intersectional level. So are those wealthy women coming from diverse backgrounds or diverse experience? Because this, I think, will bring an extra layer as well to the context, which is quite interesting for us.
So by 2030, women are going to control over $30 trillion in assets. This is a huge transfer of wealth. It is being discussed in all of the kind of financial spaces and philanthropy spaces right now. It's incredibly exciting to think about women kind of being able to finally have true control over money. But what we can't assume is just because they get control of that money, that they will, feel confident in how to deploy it or what to do with it, feel comfortable with that money and how to deploy it and what to do with it, and whether or not they will actually do anything with it themselves or just abdicate it to men in their lives. Our financial system has been built by and for men, right? It is not designed for women. And actually, a lot of it has been designed to kind of marginalize and isolate women. Mm-hmm. And so what we are concerned about is we know that when women do have control of the resources and they have the confidence and competence to deploy those resources aligned with their values, they're more likely to give to women and girls. Did you know that less than 2% of philanthropy goes to organizations focused on women and girls in the US? When women have control of the resources, they're more likely to give to women and girls. They're more likely to invest in women-owned businesses. They're more likely to, put more women into leadership positions in those businesses. And so we do believe there will be a true knock-on effect on gender equity once women actually have control. But once they get that money, we have a hard job to do to help equip them and support them and nurture them to first identify with that wealth and feel comfortable and confident with that money, have a voice in how the financial industry is designed, and really think about who they want managing that money with them. Over 70% of women will likely change financial advisors once they get access to that capital. We want to also make sure that they have the agency to actually invest, donate, bank along with their values, right? Mm-hmm. Just last week, I had a conversation with a woman who recently got very rich. And she said to me, she literally whispered to me, "The money makes me so uncomfortable." Mm-hmm. I whispered back, "It should," right? We would have a bigger problem if you were just instantly comfortable with this huge amount of money that you just got. We need to help women lean into that discomfort, to recognize that, yes, it's pretty disgusting that the inequity gap is bigger than ever, and that the gap between those who have and those who do not have is bigger than ever. But what we don't want to do is to wait around for rich people to get comfortable, because there's way too many crises to solve right now. And so I am really excited about the opportunity to work with women on getting comfortable with that money, being able to identify with their own sense of self-worth outside of that money, and then to have the resources and the references and the places they can go to deploy that money along in a holistic way around their set of values. Mm. And that goes for baby boomer women all the way to Gen Z. The baby boomer women are getting access to that money first, but very quickly it's going to get into the hands of millennials and Gen Z. And it's never too early to start talking to kids, and especially girls, about money, getting them confident with money, and knowing that money is a tool that they can manage to live a fulfilled, purposeful, and comfortable life.
Thank you as well for the reminder about the VC funding as well. On women and startups or women business, it's only 2%, and it's a number that in 2024 I wish we didn't have to see, unfortunately. But I believe with everything that you shared so far, and also the news that are starting to coming up about fundraising and philanthropy from a gender perspective, that there will be the possibility to create a movement of wealthy women who are ready to support causes that matters to everyone. We already say that, not just to women, and they are ready to make a change. And but also a reminder that it's true that money makes us very uncomfortable, and again, that's a patriarchal idea, and it's built in our DNA since we are very little. I don't think men are that uncomfortable with money as we are. even just by talking or discussing, and the fact that, maybe we whisper about it and they would just, brag about it, having received a huge amount of money. And it's important what you say, that yes, it's a big responsibility, and of course we shouldn't be feeling like super comfortable because of what is happening in the world, but it's also great to acknowledge, okay, now that I've got this, I want to do something good. So who is there to help me, who is there to direct me on the right path, so that I can have an impact, and it's not just, okay, I'm another rich person on the planet and I stay still watching. So I think everything you share so far is quite interesting, and we don't talk about this too much, and it's great that we have this moment today to reflect on this. My other question was about the intersectionality of the women. They are part of Maverick Collective, as wealth is generational wealth is changing as well. Did you notice if there is a change as well on the diversity of women that are becoming rich, and then they join the collective and they want to become donors, maybe compared to 10 years ago when you just started, or even before, if you have any information about that?
From 10 years ago when we started to now, we certainly have more diversity in the collective. It's still predominantly white. It's still predominantly global North, women from the US and from Europe. And we are slowly starting to see those changes. And I'm really excited and curious about ways to diversify more quickly. We have to acknowledge that wealth has typically sat in, among the white groups and among men, and even just getting more women into places of wealth and power is part of the shift that we need to see for more diversity. And we certainly need and want to see more people of color and more folks from the global South be able to rise up into positions of wealth, so they can also be in positions of philanthropy. Because Maverick Collective works on global issues and PSI works globally, we have been able to work with and get to know and partner with organizations that are working with philanthropists from throughout the world, particularly from Asia and Africa. And these are places that we're really excited about seeing the rise of philanthropy, particularly for issues and organizations that are operating in those countries and serving kind of communities in those countries. And we still have a lot of work to do.
Yes, it's a work in progress, but I can already see that we are going in the right direction, and this makes me really hopeful. Is there maybe an advice that you would like to give to women who maybe they are listening to us today, and they're thinking they would like to get into the fundraising sphere, or they would like to become a donor, or they are leaders in the nonprofit sector, on how maybe to face systemic barriers and what they can actually do to access the field and progress in it?
Yeah. I mean, listen, we need more people fundraising. Fundraising is hard. Fundraising is grueling. It's relentless. It's filled with disappointment. It is also filled with joy and purpose, and can be one of the most fulfilling jobs in the world, especially if you are able to surround yourself with people that you trust and that have a support system. So I always say to people who are entering fundraising, particularly women, look, try to find your tried and true, your ride or die kind of colleagues, friends, mentors, both within your organization and space and outside of it, right? People that you can work with, be true teammates with, but also be able to go out for a beer or a cookie and vent to, right? Because this is grueling hard work. I also think it's really important, if you are going to enter fundraising, to make sure that you can fundraise for a cause or an organization that you feel really passionately about. I think that if you're not, you're going to burn out pretty quickly. And I also find that I think the most effective fundraisers, and I would add to this, the most effective donors, are people that have actually implemented work and been on the front lines themselves if possible. You know, I spent the first 15 years of my career running programs both in the US and globally for teens around sexual and reproductive health. You know, I've been in the work for a long time. I have, you know, been proximate, working with communities directly hand in hand. I've done a ton of proposal writing, et cetera, trying to raise money and gain attention for the issues and the projects that I was working on. And having that deep knowledge of the issues, being able to speak as someone who has been a nonprofit leader, who is an activist and has been an activist, I think makes me a much stronger fundraiser. It makes me a more authentic fundraiser. And also, quite frankly, I'm a small P philanthropist. I'm a small D donor, but it makes me a more effective donor. In the US, we have this thing like take your kid to work day. I always thought it'd be really amazing if we had like a take your donor to work day, right? Like, how do we get donors to actually fundraise themselves, right? Imagine donors had to actually go through some sort of master's course in running nonprofits and fundraising for nonprofits before being able to become a donor. How much more authentic, trust-based, feminist, bold might they be? And so again, as a fundraiser, the more exposure that you can have to the work that you are fundraising for, and hopefully by doing it and experiencing it yourself, the more effective you'll be.
That would be a great idea, actually.
A lot of what the Maverick model is. So, you know, we at Maverick Collective, we call our approach experiential philanthropy, marrying hands-on engagement in projects with real dollar grant making, so that our donors are actually getting out into the field and they're kind of rolling up their sleeves and getting in alongside our frontline change makers and doing some of the work up close, certainly seeing it and experiencing it up close. And then hopefully we are activating them as influencers and as fundraisers to go out there and champion and try to crowd in more money and more funders. And so I do think we're doing a little, you know, we are doing that at Maverick, and it is transformative for our members. You know, what we see is them really changing their entire mindset and their behavior as donors over the course of the years that they work with us.
I didn't write down this question, so bear with me. But I was reading an article this morning about microfeminism acts. Is there any microfeminist act that you think maybe people could start implementing if they have an interest in getting into fundraising, or maybe perhaps in the future become a donor as well? So in the fundraising space, what we can do, because maybe some people that are listening to us might think, oh, I don't have the money, but I would really like to make a change, no? And sometimes little gestures, they can actually also make a change. So would you like to comment on this? I know I put you on the spot, but I think it's an interesting perspective as well.
And that is an interesting perspective, and I hadn't heard that term before, so I'm excited to go and look it up and read more about it. But I do think that there are everyday things that we can be doing in the philanthropy world, in the nonprofit world, to kind of add a dose of feminism. You know, as in the kind of fundraising and philanthropy space, I mentioned this before, but for too long, we've had donors who are the donors are calling the shots, right? It's donors who typically are saying, here's how much money I'm going to give you. Here's what I want to see from that money. Here's the impact that I expect. Here's how long you get to use my money for it, and then you have to deliver impact. Versus organizations, nonprofit leaders, those on the front lines, communities actually saying to donors, here's what our needs are, here's what impact means, here's how we're going to measure it, and here's how much money we need to do it, and also here's a reasonable timeline, right? So as a donor, even if you're a small D donor, right, even if you're just able to make small gifts, a little bit of money, a little bit of your paycheck to an organization or a cause that you care about, understanding that when you just give that money, what we call unrestricted, right? No strings attached. I'm not putting conditions on it. I'm not telling you, organization, where you have to spend my money. I trust you, organization, to spend my money in the most effective way possible for you. So giving money in a way that is unrestricted, doesn't matter if that's $5 or, $50 million. That is gold to an organization, to a nonprofit organization trying to do hard work on hard problems in hard places. And as a fundraiser, the more that we can actually steward donors to be more flexible and to remove restrictions and conditions on their money for the organizations that we're fundraising for, that to me is a feminist act. And that to me is a feminist practice of philanthropy that we can do in small doses. And often it works better in small doses before we get to the big doses.
We're moving towards the end of the interview, and I always like to look a little bit at the past and then at the future with the last questions. And if you were to look back at the start of your career and to where you are now, what are the most valuable lessons that you have learned along the way and that made you the woman you are today and able to do the work you're doing?
I think it comes back to a bit of what we talked about, but it's really about getting proximate to the issues that you care about and getting experience. I have always been the type of person that I have followed my passion and my purpose way more than following money or following what convention or society has said I need to do. And have made life choices that have really allowed me to experience and immerse myself as much as possible in the issues that I cared about. So for me, during college, when I started to get really interested in the HIV/AIDS epidemic and movement and kind of seeing the impact that activism was having on accelerating the movement for, getting more people with HIV access to medicine, I decided to study abroad in Cape Town, South Africa, which was like the heart of the HIV epidemic at the time, and really started to become active and activated in student protests and campaigns. I volunteered in townships where I was working with communities impacted by HIV. And so I made the choice to, immerse myself as much as I could, always recognizing that I was a foreigner, but immerse myself as much as I could to witness and understand and go deeper on an issue that I had started to get passionate about. And so for me, I would say, like, when I look back at my career and at where I am today, being able to speak and advocate with my own sense of authenticity and self-worth and self-belief that I really do have an important perspective and a voice and the ability to influence on these issues, it's because I really spent time getting out there and getting proximate and learning deeply and listening deeply to what communities want and need, and making sure that I was being responsive and inclusive of those who are on the front lines and not bringing too much of my own bias into it. So some of the most important and critical relationships that I have had in my career are with folks who never get the spotlight, right? I get to kind of, I work with these incredible women who are well-resourced and wealthy, who have a lot of influence, who sit at tables of power, who, because of even my access to them, I get to be on podcasts and written up in magazines. And so I know how important it is that I can speak authentically and with a voice that is truly uplifting the folks who never get the spotlight, but who are doing the actual brave and bold work of trying to make change. And in my life, that is social workers, who I think are absolutely the most unsung heroes in our society, teachers, case managers, right? People who are activists on the front lines, who are literally putting their bodies and lives on the line because they are, a gay man in a country like Uganda, or, an adolescent girl who is fighting an entire culture who says she needs to marry at age 13 and start having babies now and fast. I want to make sure that I am just here to uplift those stories and remove the barriers that stand in the way of them telling their own stories. And I think the only way to truly be able to do that is to have worked and existed alongside them.
And looking to the future, what do you hope to see in terms of progress and advancement in achieving gender equality and gender parity in fundraising and philanthropy?
I'm going to come back to those three words that I started with, which is voice, choice, and agency. Again, we talk about it a lot in the reproductive rights space, but I think it translates to just about every space and every kind of identity and cause that somebody could take on. Like, I just so desperately want to see a world where more people, and particularly women, given how much we've been stripped of these things, have a voice in how systems, pick your system, right? The healthcare system, the financial industry, like the education system, right? That you pick it, but women have a voice in how those systems are designed and how they serve everybody to get closer to equity, and that voice is credible and authentic, respected, and dignified. And that is women who have absolutely not a dollar to their name, all the way to the billionaires, that they have more of a voice to make sure that those systems are designed to actually help us achieve equity. I want to see more women have true choice over their bodies and what they do with them throughout their life, right? From birth to death, from menstruation to menopause, women need more choice and more access to tools, resources, information, products, services that will allow them to have the full range of choices over their bodies, over their livelihoods, over their money, right? Over their education, over their partners, over their safety. And finally, once you have that choice, ensuring that they have the agency to act on that choice. And that is partly about education and information and resources, but it's also really about clearing out the systemic harms and norms that hold them in their place and have denied them or even removed their rights to access to be able to access their true power and their true agency. And again, I see so many parallels between women's ability to be agents of their own bodies right here where I sit in the US and across the world. But I also see it around being agents of change with their money and their capital and their ability to be a true decision maker in what happens with, unfortunately, this very precious resource that is money in our world.
Well, Rena, thank you very much for this beautiful interview. I hope that everyone that listened to us today discovers something more about philanthropy, about how you can be a feminist philanthropist, and what we can do even in our little spaces and in our daily life to make sure that we all thrive for a change and we support causes that they're actually going to make an impact. So thank you again so much as well for the work you're doing with Maverick Collective. If we would like to know more or get in touch with you, how do we do that?
Please check out our website, maverickcollective.org, and there's ways to get in touch with us there. And if you're interested in the work of PSI more broadly, psi.org, and we would absolutely love to hear from you. I also am pretty active on LinkedIn, and that's an easy way to connect with me.
Amazing. Thank you so much again, and welcome to Wempower family, because we're going to keep in touch and check the progress. And again, this has been a very important conversation that needed to be had.
Well, thank you so much for the work that you do, because uplifting women's stories and stories about women and actually putting a positive and dignified lens on women and their work and their success in this world is just so important. So I am really excited to be part of the family and excited to do more together in the future.
Thank you again. If you would like to know more about Wempower, you can follow us on all social media at Wempower UK. You can also visit our website www.wempower.co and subscribe to our weekly newsletter. And before you go, one last thing. On the 13th of May, we have launched our new revamped Wempower magazine. After 4 years of silence, we decided to make a comeback in 2024 with a first issue entirely dedicated to women in politics. Why women in politics, you say? Because 2024 is the year of the elections, and we really want to shed a light on women in politics and leadership, but also talk about what matters to women voters when they need to decide who is going to represent them. So if you would like to purchase a copy, you just have to visit our website www.wempower.co. Remember that together we empower women. Till the next time, I am your host, Ilaria Biancacci.